If I'm like, I guess Daren can hold this down. So welcome to the Daren and Peter Show. And I guess we'll talk to you today about the Compleat cup, the fill, fold, drink vessel.
I'm someone who started as a designer. I started out by studying graphic design as well as illustration. I wound up moving in and out of a bunch of different design firms. Ultimately wound up working in museum design. And part of what was really interesting about that work to me is that it's multidisciplinary. So it's a project where you start with a certain set of learning objectives, you wrap a story around it, and then what you'll do is you'll have architects, writers, filmmakers, industrial designers working together to sort of advance a concept. It's sort of in that same spirit that Proverb executes, but it's also in the same spirit that I think is informed for what we've been able to do with the Compleat. And so I think Peter and I both share the view that one of the ways that you innovate is bringing new thinking to pre-existing problems. And Peter, I don't know if you want to start to tell the story a little about where the idea came about.
Yeah, sure. I used to live in Berkeley, and right near my apartment was Pete's Coffee. And one of the righteous things that people did there was to arrive with your own ceramic mug rather than using a paper cup. And we were all very proud of that. Of course, there still were paper cups available at the store. And there were occasions when I lapsed and didn't have my ceramic cup. And so I would use a paper cup. And this was also back in the era, this is like late 80s, when you recycled something, you also wanted to crush it down to a small enough size so that the recycling center would be able to accommodate as many plastic cups or paper cups or whatever objects were being recycled. And so I kind of got into the habit of crushing cups. And I realize I'm going to need my hands here, but I just wanted to talk about the inspiration. So I actually just took a regular paper cup and I just started to crush it down. Kind of like this. And that's where it all started. Because I saw that there might be a way to fold over a paper cup in such a way that you end up with a drinking spout that you could drink out of, and maybe this would be the way you could get rid of those nasty plastic tops. Because I had always regarded a paper cup and a plastic top as a kind of grotesque chimera, because I never felt like it looked particularly elegant, and it always bothered me too, even back in the late 80s, that you had to separate out the paper element from the plastic element in order for it to actually go into a recycling phase of its existence. And it seemed like a potentially simple solution. But of course, like so many things, particularly when you're designing buildings, your initial ideas can be simple, but you have to fish through all the complexity to get back to the simplicity. And I think the part that was kind of fascinating is that this simple cup took so far 94 iterations to get to the point where the flaps actually close properly and do what they're supposed to do. And to be honest, I feel a little bit like I'm trespassing on a lot of your guys' space because I'm not an industrial designer, but as you appreciate, design does cross disciplines, and most of the intent and challenges in the process of designing a product are similar for that or for a building.
Yeah, in a lot of ways, I think that one of the things that's kind of interesting about this project is this idea of being able to sort of see an opportunity in something that most of us kind of begin to just take for granted. Peter and I have kind of joked that if you've ever had a stone in your shoe, has anyone had a stone in their shoe? Right? Well, you can still walk, right? You can figure out, like, if you put your toe down this way or whatever, like you can still kind of work it out. And in many ways, this idea of actually having, a plastic lid, for something that just seems like it's kind of redundant. it was really about sort of how do you, I don't know, see an opportunity where others don't, or how do you sort of challenge the status quo, and that's sort of the spirit that we really tried to approach the project within.
Yeah, I mean, there were also other ergonomic things about plastic tops that bugged me, and one of them was that if you've got a nose on your face and you're drinking out of a cup with a plastic top on it, and you're trying to get to the last quarter of the volume of liquid, your damn nose hits the plastic top, and that can be annoying, particularly if you have a large schnoz, like I kind of do. So, and then the other thing is that there are certain plastic tops, particularly the ones that go on the small cups, that are totally flat and they have that little peel back thing, and it makes a square opening. If the liquid is hot, I don't know about you guys, but I would always burn my lips, and it was incredibly painful. And the thing that this also solves is that because there's more distance between the top of the liquid and the top of the spout, by the time the liquid gets to your spout, you have time to modulate the heat, so you don't get this sudden burn. So those are among the major motivations for the cup.
Yeah. So having a great idea is one part of this, and the second is around sort of just creating at least enough momentum and discipline to just try and sort of keep it going. But some of the other challenges that we've had sort of in and around it are, how do you begin to build an organization so that you can sort of commercialize this idea? And so part of that comes in the form of trying to figure out who really are the right people to have within the room. How do we sort of keep the organization as flat as possible for as long as possible? At what point do you begin to invest in protecting the IP? And so in many ways, we've kind of brought a lot of design thinking to resolving a lot of those problems. I think that we've been able to go fairly far. What feels like fairly minimal investment. And as we've been able to sort of build out the management team, part of that comes in the form of Steve D'Amato, who's back there in the black shirt, but also adding someone who's heading up our business development efforts. Jeff Ware.
Steve's our general counsel. It's interesting. So some of the challenges of the flaps. Actually, I think if you hold it. So here's the action of the cup, and the part that was one of the most interesting challenges was designing the arcs, the geometry of the flaps, so that they would essentially snap down into position and hold themselves in place. And it turns out that I spent a good deal of time figuring out specific creases that are on the face of the flaps, and those things basically tell the fibers of the paper where we want them to bend, so that they will form the spouts and the relief side. And so the whole cup, the flaps are in tension. And one of the things that's cool about it is that when you squish the cup, actually the flaps get tighter, no matter if you squish it in this direction or that direction. If it's filled with a liquid and you turn it upside down, there's no way that the weight of the liquid can ever make the flaps open. Now, undoubtedly, liquid will come out of the spout, so this is a spill-resistant vessel. It's not a spill-proof vessel. But I mean, and again, one of those things that's frustrating about a plastic top cup is if you do squish the cup with any strong amount of compression, you can make the plastic top pop off. Well, anyway, among other things, in the earlier stages of the prototypes, which I was building by hand and not with a CAD table, I was perforating all these fold lines in order to find out, in order to make the things fold properly, and I had this problem where the flaps kept on ripping off eventually, and I got incredibly nervous that we were going to have to toss away the idea of the cup. Because we'd find that there's an Achilles heel, just that you wouldn't be able to open and close the flaps enough times to make the cup useful. And as it turns out, I got the geometries right eventually, had it built on a CAD table, and this cup can be reopened and closed multiple times, and it doesn't rip. That was a terrific thing.
Yeah, and along the way, I mean, there are just so many other considerations that you have to learn a bit about. So everything from, what are the actual papers that are used, in the construction of cups, You're trying to get a sense of, what does the manufacturing process look like? What are some of the considerations that a distributor is considering in terms of, does the cup actually stack? Does it fit inside of a cup holder? How do you make this into something that's really intuitive for a barista?
Right.
And so it's really kind of been, this study in terms of, learning what some of the other stakeholders are going to be interested in, in order to be able to adopt a technology like this.
Well, and the other thing too, of course, is that it's one thing to make 50 cups, on a CAD table, but this cup has to be able to be manufactured in the billions eventually. If we're lucky, it will be. It's certainly in the millions. And indeed, proof of concept really won't be there until it's produced certainly in the hundreds of thousands. And we know that there's a cup making machine that can produce the cup in the tolerances that it requires in order for the flaps to do the closing and opening properly. And so those are some of the exciting design and manufacturing stages that we're entering into now and excited about.
So a little around, just kind of telling the story. We wound up, going forward with the story a little bit earlier than we would have ordinarily. It's been an interesting process because it's been, about 2 years of Peter and I meeting on Sunday mornings, sort of working on this project in stealth, and and so we wound up, speaking with a reporter at the Globe who sort of found out a little bit about what we were working on. And it's turned into a tremendous amount of interest. Inside the 2 months since the Globe story has come out, we probably had about 50 or 60 articles and blog postings. We were in Bascome's blog a couple weeks ago. But it's also generated a tremendous amount of interest from all over the world. Yeah. And so it's been interesting in terms of this idea that it feels like we're tapping into a real concern, and a much larger conversation.
Yeah. When you think about what benefits the cup can bring, what we see is that this is a life cycle cup in terms of understanding its full benefits. I mean, as you know, there isn't anything in the world that isn't fully recyclable. It just depends on how long you're willing to wait. I mean, the Earth will recycle anything. It might take 100,000 years for some stuff, but so the thing that we think is exciting about the cup is that it has influences all along its life cycle stream. So from the get-go, it's a single material cup instead of a dual material cup, and then the next step is that when you're in the manufacturing stage, you're only manufacturing one object, not two. When you're in the distribution phase, you have boxes of cups that are all nested in the box, but you don't have boxes next to it that are filled with various size plastic tops. So when a truck is filled up with cups in boxes that are the Compleat, there can be actually the volume of transport is actually smaller, and frankly that can contribute directly to fuel savings and distribution costs in general. When it comes to the retailer, when they get the cup in their store, you actually will need smaller amount of square footage to store the same number of cups for your customers, and then right there's either energy savings because you can have a smaller store, or you can have the same size store but more retail space because you're spending less of your space in the cup. And then one of the key benefits is that when it comes to the end of its sort of retail cycle is what do you do with it? Well, to the extent that all paper cups with plastic tops can be recycled, they still have to be separated, and that can be a big challenge as to whether or not the cup actually ends up in a recycling center or a composting center. But with the Compleat, where do you toss it? Well, you don't have to think too much about it. You put it into the bin, and it's a single stream effort. So the next question is, what does it become in the future? Well, like any paper cup, a paper cup can become another paper product, and to some extent they can become a paper cup again when the technology for that is fully developed. As you may or may not know, paper cups with a plastic lining or a PLA lining can be recycled, downcycled to something else. And the holy grail is the splitting of the paper and the film in order to be able to recycle the paper that came out of the cup back into a paper cup. And so what this does is it brings us a tremendous step closer to recycling or composting life cycle return because it's a single object instead of two.
So as you probably noticed by now, like our cup looks different, and you know, and we think that there's benefit in that as well. You know, if you go to Starbucks right now, you know, Starbucks lobby, you know, to have post-consumer waste be allowed to be used in food packaging. You know, if you're not someone who's paying attention to that, you think it's just another regular paper cup. You know, we think that there's benefit to retailers who adopt the Compleat because it underscores you know, their interest in being eco-aligned. You know, its iconic shape is something that would benefit a retailer even from 30 feet away in terms of you know, choices that they've made, or choices that their consumers have made, or choices that their competitors haven't made. You know, you're walking down the street with this, and someone else is walking down the street with styrofoam. You know, how do you feel about the styrofoam? You know, the other you know, tremendous benefit that we think that we've gotten out of this is with it completely being made out of paper and starting out flat, the top surface of the cup is actually a messaging surface. So that's, you know, a surface that could be used for advertising. You know, the average person has a paper cup for about 16 minutes. You know, that's considerably longer than the exposure that you'll get to a magazine ad. That's considerably longer than a billboard. You know, and so we think that there's a real opportunity for retailers to build relationships with consumers through this, whether it's advertising, whether it's gaming, whether it's that you're using this as a convenient mechanism to hold a packet of sugar or a tea bag. So as an architect, I work a lot with CAD, and you know, as much as AutoCAD is a frenemy for architects, I do have to thank it for making the Compleat possible, because you know, all the iterations and the CAD table translations came from that, and I'm also a big fan of SketchUp, and that helped me out tremendously too. So, and I think maybe we could also just speak to the technology of the internet and exactly,
you know.
Yeah, I mean, you know, the reality is that you know, and it makes me feel like a dinosaur to even say this, but you know, I mean, we wouldn't have been able to do this 10 or 15 years ago with so few people, and you know, and so you know, the degree to which we've been able to, you know, create a prototype that is mechanical, you know, that actually is able to demonstrate how this actually functions. You know, the fact that we've been able to go viral and be able to, you know, create a level of visibility for the product. You know, these are all things that we've really been able to take advantage of and learn from other initiatives that have done similar things.
So I think that's it. So I guess we're open for questions.
Yeah.
Thanks very much for your presentation.
Sure.
So I'm in a similar position developing packaging, and
Yeah.
One of my questions for you is, I guess, how are you protecting your innovation? What kind of IP protection have you proceeded with?
Yeah.
Where are you in the cycle? Or what's your strategy in terms of defending your innovation, making sure you're the one to commercialize it?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Okay, so actually one of the first things that we did was go find a lawyer, an IP protection lawyer, when this cup was probably at like iteration number 5, because we pretty much knew that there was something here. And the part that's frightening about a cup like this is it's outrageously easy to reverse engineer. And so patent protections was our primary goal. And so actually back in June of 2009, we put in our patent application for both a utility patent and a design patent. And I presume that everybody here in the audience knows the difference, but essentially a utility patent is a broad generalized claim or claims on the functions of this cup, in this case the cup, and the design patent is the specific design of the cup, so that's everything from like what the shape of the blank is to the proportions of the cup. The thing about the utility patent, which was exciting for us, is that this thing is there are a lot of other fold top cups out there that have come and gone in the patent world, but none of them have produced a spout like this. And so our utility patent in particular protects us from that. So anyway, so we made those applications. It takes a long time for this stuff to go through the process. Actually, just last week, we got our notice of allowance for the design patent, which is a tremendous threshold for us, and it bodes well for the utility patent. And then, of course, we also applied for international patent protection as well. For that, of course, you can't do a utility patent for a PCT, but you can do a design patent, and that's in process. We've had a first office action on the PCT, the international patent, and they haven't found anything, any prior art that conflicts with it. The primary thing you also have to remember is that you need a lot of cash for patent protection. It's very expensive, and that certainly can be an impediment for people, and to some extent it's been for us, but we're plowing forward. The other thing is that patent protection in some ways is only as strong as the depth of your bank account and in your ability to prosecute somebody who steps into your IP space. And some of the ways that you can protect yourself from that kind of challenge is getting your product out in public and having the product and the name applied to it become associated with you, the designers. And our lawyers made it clear to us that when the time was right for us to be able to get the thing out in the press would be a big benefit, because it puts a stake in the ground, and it says that even somebody who knocks off the cup will have a much harder time defending themselves because we are already out there. People know that this is the Compleat, that it's associated with Peter and Daren, that this is the particular shape that it has. And then there's the issue of trademarking. Trademarking is really important too. So of course we're trademarking the name Compleat across the globe. And then there's also there's trade dress, which is actually the three-dimensional shape of the object that's associated with the Compleat. Examples of that are like the Coca-Cola bottle. And the interesting thing about trade dress, of course, is you can't actually get trade dress until the product's out in the market. But if you do, that's a very powerful piece of protection, because the actual shape, just the idea of the shape, becomes part of your IP. We can trademark the silhouette, and that will happen. Actually, that will happen by April, we hope. So I think that was probably more thorough than you wanted. Next.
Is the cup reusable?
Yeah.
Oh.
I mean, it's reusable like any paper cup is reusable. I mean, there's a limited number of times that you probably want to use it before it's going to get so stained or something. But I mean, to be specific, this is not just a coffee cup. I mean, this is a vessel for holding a liquid. For instance, the utility patent doesn't call this a coffee cup, because there's so many other things that this could do. I mean, it could even dispense paint, or motor oil, for all we know. And we also believe that it has a role to play with other materials. I mean, just as I was saying, that the proper thing to do when you go to a coffee shop is to actually have your ceramic cup with you. But if you had a version of the Compleat that was made out of PLA plastic, but a thicker version of it that was more permanent, and you could use that over and over again, we'd be all for it. So, and clearly also, the world of the cold cup beverage is a huge market. It's actually much larger than the hot cup beverage, and we envision this being used that way too. And I know. So, next, anybody else?
Can you talk about how your distribution channels work and how they came about?
Yeah, distribution channels.
I got that.
Yeah.
Distribution channel.
We don't have them yet. And but we have a lot of inquiries from people who are distributors who are very eager to distribute it. We've got, far flung, from the United States to New Zealand, Morocco, Hungary. Bahrain. They're all interested, but you can't get to that stage of being able to contract with somebody who's a distributor until you've got a committed manufacturer. and that's what we're working on right now, and so I mean we're looking forward to the distribution being.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I mean, there are a number of considerations in terms of finding the right manufacturer, because the one thing that a retailer doesn't want to have happen is once they adopt or invest in sort of adopting a new technology like this, is to have an interruption in availability, and so whether that has to do with its level of quality or whether the product is showing up on time or things along those lines. So in the conversations that we're having right now, those are certainly very important criteria.
Yeah.
Hi.
Hi.
A couple thoughts I had about things you could do with it.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about who some of the target customers might be, and because it's a nicely designed item. What about putting, having partnerships with some cultural institutions, museums, and
Oh, yeah.
a QR code on the top where people could actually sort of enter a tour.
Absolutely.
At a museum or something like that. And the other thought I had is I'm a parent, and it looks like a sippy cup.
Right.
And what's great about that, you talk about the beverage, industry being, the cold beverage industry being so large. What if you had a permutation of that for parents and it was pre-filled with, some kind of a natural juice you might like take off on that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, we've thought about those very things, and that's part of what we think is really exciting about it. I mean, one of the things that this sort of goes to as well is just the order of magnitude of the paper cup on this planet is pretty intense. There are, at least as of 2 years ago, the planet was using 300 billion paper cups a year. The United States alone, 200 billion of them. And so, as you can appreciate, even like any of the small benefits that this cup brings, whether it's messaging, whether it's helping to reduce the environmental impact of the cup, if a fractional difference is brought to the world by the Compleat, a grand difference is made globally. And so when you also talk about who do we want to use this, man, it would be terrific if an organization like Burger King adopted this, or McDonald's. I think a Happy Meal, for instance, the parent who didn't bring the sippy cup for their kid, but there's a smaller version of this for the kid, and there's that benefit. So.
Yeah, but earlier in the presentation we talked about this idea of collaboration and sort of getting the right people in the room. And one of the things that we found out or have found in having those conversations are to hear sort of these additional perspectives on potential uses, or the idea of being able to use this as a dispensing device and not just as a transporting device, right? But your point is well taken, and certainly there are a number of other applications for this.
I see this as a blank canvas in terms of branding, and I'm wondering, I have two questions. Number one, since you basically have a billboard here when you're using it with commercial products, I also see the use of this like for industry. It's a place where a carpenter can carry bolts or whatever around a shop, but when you're using it as a blank canvas for branding for products, how vested are you in the beauty of the design, and how much control do you foresee wanting to have over what people are going to print on it?
This is the Apple versus PC question. You're going to field this one.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting conversation. To some degree, I think it has to do with our go-to-market strategy. Initially, we've been thinking of this as being a product that would get adopted primarily by, large quick-service restaurants. The types that you think about, that might immediately come to mind. And so, so I would say that initially, we think that the shape of this cup is iconic in and of itself. And is, to your point, a blank canvas, or really is a platform that would support their branding efforts. We could certainly see opportunities for something like this where, if it means sort of partnering with whether it's not-for-profits or other types of organizations that are sort of equal aligned, to be able to sort of use it as a tool for messaging. We've certainly given some consideration to the idea of perhaps even having, relationships with, whether it's a foundation or specific types of organizations where there would be an additional benefit you get through adopting something like this. But I would say that the last way that we've kind of thought about it, or maybe not last, but one other way that we've thought about this is that it might be primarily a medium for advertising. In the same way that coffee sleeves are used for advertising, and whether that means to partner with an organization like Clear Channel or something along those lines. But I don't know. I mean, I would say that we probably would be fairly open, with some constraints, around sort of what we would want to see happen with the company. Because I think that we're probably more interested in the innovation that it would inspire than anything else.
Yeah, I mean, it goes to the whole question of cultural compatibility. I mean, it's at the smaller scale, it's part of how we built our small team of people for our company, was finding cultural compatibility so that we would all operate, toward a mission that made sense and an end that we were all aligned with. And I can appreciate that there might be organizations that you might think, maybe you're going to the question, there's an organization that wants to brand this with politics, or culture that might not seem immediately aligned to the cup. Am I right? That's part of what you're asking?
Yeah, I guess is there a tipping point?
Well, I think that there's certainly, the way it's introduced is really important, and where it stands in its initial space. And clearly we want it to mean everything from environmental stewardship to innovate it, to basically reframing the status quo. And organizations that think in those ways, we are the ones that we hope will be attracted to it first. I mean, based on the inquiries we've gotten so far, that does seem to be the case. And so I don't think there'd be any graphics that we'd object to. We'd only be happy with it. But I'd also say that, because it can have such a significant impact when it's scaled up, when as many billions of the cups are made, I'm all for having it be all over the place. Even with organizations that I might not have originally imagined, because if you can do good incidentally by using the cup, that's terrific.
Somehow I'm reminded of a fish and chips or something.
Apple turnover box.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so, but in a way, it's a little bit like my taste buds are ready for the apple strudel or the fish and chips. Is that something that's
Well, if you
stood in your way?
No, well, if you puree the fish or the chips, it'll flow. So.
But in terms of association, do you think this will affect people? The similarity of the shape or the...
Well, I mean, to the extent that you've associated it with a food dispensing object, that's terrific. And there's clearly going to be a wide range of associations that people have. As I said, for me, I think about the apple turnover box. Some people will think of Chinese food containers. Others will think about their kid's sippy cup. But I think the thing about the cup is that it's intuitively easy to understand what it's trying to do. I mean, you understand that this accommodates the liquid, that you tilt it and you drink out of a spout. And if you end up being a small minority of people who have trouble drinking coffee out of it or your soda pop because you're thinking about fish and chips, then I will miss your market. But I guess we're confident that it's not a large enough market for it to...
Flavor.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's, at the end of the day, I mean, we're not trying to replace all plastic lids.
Right.
What we're really trying to do is give consumers a choice. And so we certainly think that there's interest thus far.
Yeah.
It also eliminates straws.
Well, it does. That's an interesting question because, I mean, when you drink out of a straw, you're sucking to get the liquid out, and when you drink out of a spout, it's still you're pouring, and so this isn't really a straw substitute, and I would classify it as something kind of in between, and if I have a cultural dream, it will be that people can wean themselves from straws and enjoy drinking out of a spout, because if you want to talk about an environmental insult, straws are horrific, especially when they get into the ocean and they choke fish and other animals and whatnot. But there are variants on this cup that will accommodate a straw. There's a different cut pattern for the top of the spout, and that allows a straw to be inserted. But to be honest, we'd really prefer that the people won't be using straws in association with the cup. Oh, sorry, wrong thing. Have a cup.
Any other questions? All right. Well, I want to thank Peter and Daren again for coming out.
Thank you.
And yeah, I really want to thank you guys.
Yeah.